that the Supreme Court imparted to Uddhav Thackeray today. The Bal Thackeray Sena leader and former Chief Minister of Maharashtra had moved the top court, demanding that the apex court should term illegal his ouster in a political coup last year. Viewers will recall that the coup was engineered by Uddhav Thackeray's one-time loyalist, Eknath Shinde, who defected to the BJP and split the Shiv Sena. But today, after the Supreme Court gave Uddhav Thackeray a patient hearing, the apex court lost his appeal to be reinstated as Chief Minister by the Supreme Court, viewers. Now, this is very, very fundamental, because what Uddhav Thackeray was hoping was that he would be reinstated as a Chief Minister of nothing else than Eknath Shinde's elevation to the post would have been at least scrapped. But none of those outcomes were possible. First, listen in to the Chief Justice of India giving his reasoning.
This argument does not account for the fact that Mr. Thackeray did not face the floor test on 30 June 2022 and submitted his resignation. This court cannot quash a resignation that has been submitted voluntarily. Had Mr. Thackeray refrained from resigning from the post of the Chief Minister, this court could have considered the grant of the remedy of reinstating the government headed by him. The order of this court dated 29 June 2022 held that the outcome of the trust vote to be conducted on 30 June 2022 shall be subject to the final outcome of this batch of petitions. Since the trust vote was not held, the question of it being subject to the final outcome of these petitions does not, therefore, arise.
But despite the setback, Uddhav Thackeray today chose to claim the moral high ground. Listen to him and his advocates claiming that the Shinde government is no longer tenable. Listen in.
ठीक है, कानूनी तौर पर मैंने इस्तीफा दिया, शायद गलत हो सकता है, लेकिन नैतिकता अगर देखें तो जिन लोगों को मेरे पिताजी ने, मेरे पार्टी ने सब कुछ दिया, वो लोग उठकर मेरे ऊपर उंगलियां उठाएं, तो उनके लिए मैं मेरा विश्वास या अविश्वास क्यों जताने की कोशिश करूं? तो ऐसे लोगों को अधिकार ही नहीं है मुझे सवाल पूछने का। जिन लोगों ने मेरे पार्टी से सब कुछ लिया और गद्दारी की, तो गद्दार लोग मेरे ऊपर अविश्वास लाए और उसका मैं सामना करूं, कैसे हो सकता है? ये तो गद्दार लोग हैं। आज तो कोर्ट ने कहा, और मतलब कोर्ट ने गद्दार नहीं किया, लेकिन ये सारी बातें हैं। आज तो मतलब महाराष्ट्र में आप सरकार ही नहीं है। नैतिकता तो अभी जैसे मैंने नैतिकता का पालन किया, तो अगर इस मुख्यमंत्री में जरा भी कोई नैतिकता होगी तो मुख्यमंत्री और उप मुख्यमंत्री ने इस्तीफा देना चाहिए, जैसे मैंने दिया।
Number one, the whip by the so-called Shinde faction was held to be illegal. Number two, the recognition of that illegal whip by the Speaker was itself illegal. Thirdly, the Speaker's recognition of the entire Shinde faction was held to be illegal. And finally, friends, the entire governor's decision has been declared illegal on the ground that it lacks relevant objective material.
Well, Uddhav Thackeray and the lawyer Dr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi basing their views on the fact that the then governor and the speaker came in for sharp criticism from the Supreme Court. The verdict reads, and let me quote out of this verdict, especially on the issue of the speaker's decision. Now, viewers, this is what it says. Speaker recognizing Gogavle as chief whip of Sena is illegal. Now, Mr. Gogavle was part of the Eknath Shinde faction of the Sena that broke away, viewers. So, the speaker recognizing Gogavle as the chief whip of the Sena is illegal, and if you just extrapolate from there, if there was really a floor test, which there was, viewers, then that whip, therefore, would be untenable. Decision of speaker recognizing Shinde as the party leader is also illegal. And the floor test cannot be used as a medium to resolve intra-party disputes. And now the then governor is also faulted. The governor erred in relying on a resolution to conclude Uddhav lost the support of the majority. Governor had no objective material to doubt the confidence of the incumbent government. Governor can't enter the political arena and play the role in intra-party disputes. So all of this has been said. And after this scathing observation, spoke to the then governor, Bhagat Singh Koshyari, who says he still thinks his decision was right. Listen in very quickly, viewers.
जब सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने कह दिया कि शिंदे का शपथ लेना सही था, जब शिंदे जी ने कोर्ट ने कह दिया है कि जब उद्धव जी ने इस्तीफा दे ही दिया तो उसके आगे तो कोई कुछ किया ही नहीं जा सकता। राज्यपाल के नाते मेरा ये कर्तव्य था कि कोई इस्तीफा दे रहा है तो मैं उसे स्वीकार कर लूं। तो उसको स्वीकार करके मैंने कौन सी गलती की है? और फिर सवाल ही क्यों आगे उठा रहे हो? सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने खुद जब कह दिया है कि जब उन्होंने त्यागपत्र दे दिया है तो उससे आगे कुछ किया ही नहीं जा सकता।
Viewers, the problem here is that Mr. Uddhav Thackeray decided to quit before the floor test. In effect, he didn't demonstrate the courage of conviction to face the outcome on the floor. And it is because of that reason, viewers, that he backed out. He quit his position as Chief Minister. He threw in the towel, in effect, that the floor test, the governor was allowed to carry on with the floor test, as a result of which there was obviously a change in government. Now, obviously the BJP is pointing that out. In response, Mr. Fadnavis and Mr. Shinde talked about this, saying that, look, how does the question of morality come into this when Mr. Uddhav Thackeray did not want to be tested on the floor of the House, which is really where things should have taken place. So if that didn't happen, if A didn't happen, then everything else that follows is inconsequential. Now that many can argue is a technical response, it's a technical defense, but the fact is, viewers, that it was convincing enough for the Supreme Court. Now, while blame will be traded by Uddhav Thackeray and his loyalists and the BJP and the Eknath Shinde faction of the Shiv Sena, viewers, there's no getting away from the fact. There's just no getting away from the fact that Uddhav Thackeray walked away from a contest. He chose to quit, preferring not to face a floor test. That sets him apart from his father Bal Thackeray's record. The founder of the Sena was known to bravely stand up to challenges, some that even threatened to unseat him as boss of the Shiv Sena. Now consider these hard facts, viewers, and I always put the hard facts before you, for you to consider, and only on the basis of these hard facts do I build arguments that you could also perhaps use. Now let's go back to 1999. The Shiv Sena is voted out of power. It is on the sidelines. But Bal Thackeray refused the option of allying with, as he called it, the scoundrel NCP led by Sharad Pawar. This is not what his son did. His son eventually allied with a party that his own father thought was a scoundrel party. So completely did a volte-face. So Uddhav Thackeray completely does a volte-face. In 2005, viewers, Mr. Rane and Raj Thackeray quit the Shiv Sena. It was a monumental body blow to the Shiv Sena. But Mr. Bal Thackeray refused to give in to the demands of leadership change. And he let these individuals go. And he held on to his party, built it back up, and then handed the reins to his son. But Uddhav Thackeray could have fought for his party, but quit his post, viewers, lost both the party and the symbol and the Sena. Now once again, let's go back to 2010. Unsuitability of Sonia Gandhi was a big issue back then. Mr. Thackeray never backed down on opposing Sonia Gandhi over foreign origin, even though Mr. Sharad Pawar, who quit the party almost 10 years earlier, did a U-turn on that issue, viewers. But Uddhav Thackeray, viewers, had no compunctions in allying with the Congress. In 2012, strong opposition to Congress. Bal Thackeray compared the Congress to a disease, quote unquote, refused to have any truck with the grand old party. Again, his son doesn't follow in his father's footsteps. And therefore, viewers, today, the question is, while we debate morality, discuss morality, can a paper tiger claim the legacy of Mr. Bal Thackeray legitimately? If he's run away from a contest, can he cry victim? Can he still appeal to those and say that he retains the moral high ground? That's the fundamental question, viewers. Let's ask it. Let's ask it. We're also hoping to be joined by Mr. Mahesh Jethmalani, Rajya Sabha Member of Parliament, who was one of the litigants here, and he's there with us. Let's go straight across to him. Mr. Jethmalani, thank you for speaking to Times Now, to me this evening. And I want to begin by asking you, while today you can claim vindication because your government is intact, but your opponent, Uddhav Thackeray, you might have heard him just a short while back, he says that you've lost the moral battle. How do you react to this?
Well, the moral battle really is, as you've pointed out. I mean, let's get into the issue of morality. You already pointed out that historically the Shiv Sena under Balasaheb Thackeray, Uddhav's father, would never have any truck with any of these parties, the MV alliance is now allied with Uddhav Thackeray. But that's historical. You can, break tradition with your father's ideology. That's a separate issue. Point is, more important, Rahul, there was a pre-poll alliance with the BJP. The seats that Uddhav Thackeray won were courtesy his alliance along with the BJP, and the campaign heavily depended upon the charisma of the Prime Minister, Modi, and also the Chief Minister who headed that alliance, namely Devendra Fadnavis. It was heavily dependent on that. The morality in this case really consists in breaking that pre-poll alliance for the sake of the Chief Minister's chair and aligning with people whom not only your father and historically your party has been rigidly opposed to, but which you yourself have attacked including during the very election in which you garnered the 50-odd seats which broke up. The breakup came up. The breakup by the Eknath Shinde faction came about because of your betrayal of that mandate. It's there in their resolutions. They were uncomfortable with it. The betrayal was not by Eknath Shinde, as you wrongly put it. The betrayal was of your ideology, your party, and your history. And that is why your party has split. There is no other morality. What the Supreme Court has found is illegality. That the actions of the Speaker were contrary to law. For instance, in recognizing Gogamble as the Chief Whip. Right? Now what they said was, you should have undertaken a deeper exercise before coming to that conclusion and finding out what the party and what is the party at that stage on 3rd July is also moot. Right? So the Speaker now will have to revisit it. He'll have to revisit the decision to recognize which he took to recognize Gogamble on 3rd July and decided in the light of the guidelines of the Supreme Court.
If the
Nothing
Speaker...
immoral about it.
No, let me ask you this. If the Speaker continues to play a partisan role, then how do we trust that he will actually execute his task that now, since the ball is back in his court, on taking a call on the disqualification without any partisanship?
But there is a presumption in law of constitutionality actions by constitutional actions by public figures, right? The office of Speaker is an extremely high constitutional post. So we have to presume that he will act constitutionally. If he doesn't, the Supreme Court itself has laid down in what I heard. I've not read the judgment at any length, but what I heard this morning in court, the Supreme Court has said it will be subject to judicial review. So if he doesn't act constitutionally and as per the guidelines laid down today by the Supreme Court, there is a remedy of judicial review. Nobody says, public functionaries day in and day out act unconstitutionally, and the courts by appropriate writs correct their actions. So there's no fear on that.
Okay.
As regards
so
the
you're
governor,
saying that he'll risk
I
contempt.
respectfully disagree.
No, I'll come to that.
On the finding.
No, let's talk about the governor.
Yeah, no, he'll risk contempt.
Because the then
he
governor...
won't risk contempt. He won't risk contempt. His order will be set aside. Yes.
Yeah, but
let's talk about the governor now, all right?
Yeah,
we come to the governor.
Yeah, the then governor has been criticized by the Supreme Court for overstepping his brief. Now, wasn't he playing a partisan role? And if he was, can we say that he was not playing it at the behest of the centre, sir?
No, he wasn't. There are two things. First, as to what the Supreme Court said. The Supreme Court said there was not enough material before him to come to the conclusion that Uddhav Thackeray had lost majority, right? Now, the supreme morality in such disputes is who has the majority. Governments are formed on the basis of majorities, right?
It's true.
Now, the court held that the material before the governor was not enough for him, and this has been, the court didn't call it immoral. It's Dr. Singhvi and Uddhav Thackeray who are calling the governor's conduct in asking for the floor test as immoral. Now, it is not. I respectfully disagree with the Supreme Court's finding on this aspect of the matter. I mean, this is not the time to go into it. A more detailed critique is required. According to me, respectfully and very humbly, there was enough material for the governor to have called for a floor test. But assuming there wasn't, what turns on the floor test? The morality involved entailed that Uddhav Thackeray faced the floor test. Otherwise, this whole critique of the governor's actions is irrelevant. Is it relevant at all for the determination of the issue? The morality was the chief minister should have faced the floor test. If he did not, the Supreme Court has repeatedly held that a chief minister who refuses to face a floor test, right, has admitted that he lacks a majority. Now, to take this one step further, in the facts of this case, when the confidence motion, and by the way, the next step was when Uddhav ran away from the government, right, when he said he's resigning, the Supreme Court has upheld the governor's decision to call Eknath Shinde to form a government. The Constitution mandates that as far as possible, there must be a government. We require stability, right? Stability is an extremely important moral value because we can't keep wasting time on elections. And that person has to be called who commands a majority on the floor of the House. That's the mandate when the government falls, as it did in this case.
Okay.
Right?
Well,
now, the Supreme Court held that the decision of the governor to call Eknath Shinde was legal. That's the foundation of its judgment. So this government is cloaked in legality in the light of Uddhav Thackeray running away from the battlefield.
Okay.
And just one more point which I think the Supreme Court failed to note was that when the confidence motion was held in favor of the new government that assumed power, that the vote of confidence for them, there was an overwhelming majority. It was not only the people who were disqualified, right, but they lost by many more votes than the MBA alliance should have garnered, both in the matter of the confidence vote of the government and in the election of the new Speaker Narvekar. The number of votes garnered by the new government was much more than was expected, which means there was cross-voting, and the number of votes which the MVA managed to cast was much less than its estimated strength.
Okay, so you say the original sin.
The governor, in hindsight, was certainly right that
the person did not enjoy.
The governor, in hindsight, Rahul.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so the governor, in hindsight, was right,
to be right
that Uddhav Thackeray didn't have the numbers. Now, you can call into question whether he overstepped his brief or not, but that's not an illegality. That could have been an error of judgment, and now that we have a Supreme Court judgment, perhaps that will not be repeated. Thank you, Mr. Jethmalani, for putting the facts out there and taking these questions, because these are the questions that were being posed by the opposition, and today Mr. Jethmalani at least attempts to supply answers. Thank you very much. Let's open this up, viewers, to the panel. And I want to begin with Mr. Kishore of the Shivshankar. Sir, Uddhav Thackeray ran away. His father would never have run away. Uddhav Thackeray says that he is the true legatee of his father. But clearly the cub is not following his father's example, Mr. Kishore. Can you hear me? Why don't you take that question, Mr. Tehseen Poonawala first. Take that question. I mean, you can't have it both ways. You can't run away from a contest and then say, I had the numbers, I have the moral authority to rule this, that, the other. Doesn't work that way, does it? Mr. Kishore is also...
Rahul,
So,
Rahul, you are getting me.
Yeah.
Rahul, should I answer?
Yeah, please. Mr. Kishore, answer. Mr. Kishore Tiwari, answer, please. Answer.
Rahul, Rahul meeting from... Yeah, we are meeting from long time.
Yeah.
But the Supreme Court has initially declared the action of a governor as illegal.
Not
then
illegal, sir.
In third para, he has referred the action of the speaker as illegal. But now the question comes, if ab initio actions are illegal, then whole actions and whole drama is illegal. So the formation of government stands
Sir, then
illegal,
why did Mr. Uddhav Thackeray quit? He should have taken the
CBI
test.
has not punished the person who are erring and has not performed the constitutional duties. Like calling for a floor test, one from the Koshari, other is changing the VP by Rahul Narvekar, and this has created the whole mess. Try to understand, Rahul. The unconstitutionally formed government is being promoted and run here in Maharashtra. And I learn Ram Jethmalani.
No, sir, if that were the case, then the Supreme Court would have agreed with you and would have actually reinstated Mr. Uddhav Thackeray, but that hasn't happened. Nonetheless, let Sharad Pawar respond to those charges. It is all rigged against Mr. Uddhav Thackeray.
Look, Rahul, first of all, this was neither an academic or a technical verdict. In fact, it was a victory of the legal, political, ethical, moral, constitutional and democratic stand of the Fadnavis-Shinde government. And let me explain to you how. First, on the legal front, the government has not been struck down. The government has been upheld as constitutionally valid, and therefore the Fadnavis-Shinde government continues to be in power. Point number one. Point number two, the governor's actions on page 138 and 139, para 205 has been called into being constitutionally valid when he invited Mr. Shinde, and therefore everything else after that is constitutionally valid, including the current government. Third, on the front of morality, those who fought elections with us and garnered all that seats and then did a U-turn on their original philosophy and policy and went with those whom they were abusing during the elections, they should not be preaching us, because if you were moral, then you would have gone and sought a fresh mandate in 2019, not done what you did to us. In fact, it was the original Shiv Sena. He is Uddhav Sena, not the original Shiv Sena. It is the original Shiv Sena which fought the real mandate under Modi ji's name, under Fadnavis ji's name, which is with us today, and therefore it is also a moral victory. It is a political victory because we have stood our ground, but it is actually a story, one more story that has been unmissed. That is that the political conversion of the share of Hindutva, Mr. Uddhav Thackeray, into the cat of secularism. This conversion, this political conversion on Savarkar, political conversion on Hindutva, and political conversion even on the philosophy of Bahasaheb Thackeray. Today he has lost more than the bow and arrow. He has lost even the last legacies and ideology of Bahasaheb Thackeray, and therefore I call this not just legal, technical, political victory for us, but it is also ethical and moral victory, where Mr. Shinde today has become the true legatee, not just of the bow and arrow, but also of the Vichardhara of Bahasaheb Thackeray. Okay. That once you have said something, you right. And can I just give you one test of it, Rahul, very quickly? Here is Mr. Sanjay Raut, who says very proudly, Economic Times report, that in 17 minutes we demolished the Babri structure. Today, if the Congress party in the form of Tehseen Poonawala agrees with it, he should tell us that they stand with the statement.
Okay. Tehseen Poonawala, let me ask you.
Yeah.
You're talking about morality. The Congress is talking about morality. Mr. Uddhav Thackeray is talking about morality. What is moral about stitching together a post-poll alliance? Post-poll alliances, as you know, and you've been critical of the BJP when it did one with Mufti's party, the PDP in Kashmir. You'll remember that. You were here on this show. We were all critical of it. Because they're by nature opportunistic. They are not morally defensible. So on that point alone, you can't claim the moral high ground. Secondly, surely if there was an impropriety of the nature that is being claimed today by Mr. Uddhav Thackeray and others, the Supreme Court would not have abetted in it. Would it have? And thirdly, sir, if it was all so above board, the actions of Uddhav Thackeray, had he really occupied the moral high ground here, he would have actually put his conscience to test. He didn't. He ran away.
Right. So the Supreme Court said it very clearly that the decision of Mr. Rahul Narvekar to recognize Mr. Gogavle as the chief whip is illegal. No if and but. And that's where the government loses the majority, because once you have a whip who's perhaps somewhere in Assam in a five-star resort, and the whip is not at the legislature, and the whip has been removed illegally, the whip of Eknath Shinde applies. So A, the floor test that would have happened subsequently, had it happened, would have been illegal, and Uddhav Thackeray would have been reinstated. That's what the Supreme Court said, but that did not happen.
What better way
but that did not happen.
Proving that point by going up and allowing for the conduct of the floor test?
I absolutely agree. And there, I was with you on the night when Uddhav Thackeray ji resigned, and that's the first thing I spoke to you.
Mr.
That in
Pawar
an election,
said that this was an act of great political immaturity and naivety.
See, I don't
Mr.
take,
Pawar?
I'm not a spokesperson for NCP, or I don't have any
but that's
belief, I
not
don't
fair.
care for them.
You can't suddenly now
I will think
from your own
I think from a very different point of view. So I completely concede, and that night I said this on your show.
No, but did Mr. Sharad Pawar say this or not?
I mean, it's you don't in politics resign on Facebook. That's being woke. You resign in the assembly. You remember Atal Bihari Vajpayee?
There you go. So
That's
I'm
the
asking
first.
you.
Look at the last man. You fight. So I agree with you. But let me ask you more. I completely agree. So there's no if and but out there. Mr. Uddhav Thackeray should have faced it. There's also a bigger question.
Why didn't he face it?
There's a bigger because this government, for some reason, he felt that resigning on Facebook may have gotten sympathy. I don't know what he thought, but being woke.
He did not have the numbers.
No, one second. The numbers do not add up because the whip would have applied. That's where you're wrong. No, Rahul.
That could have been contested as it was. No, hang on.
Rahul, if you're going into it, allow me to clarify.
One minute. No,
if you're going into it, allow me to clarify. No, the question that the BJP spokesperson raised of numbers would not apply is hypothetical, because then the whip of Uddhav Thackeray would apply, and these descending MLAs would have been suspended.
So they would.
That was illegal by Rahul Narvekar.
So you would have, in any case, you went in any case. One second. No. Now you're jumping. Now you're jumping the logic here.
No, I'm not.
You in any case have challenged. You would have had a better ground to challenge.
True.
Had an impropriety happened.
True.
On the floor of the House, and you would have lost because of it. And today perhaps you would have been back in power.
Reinstated. Absolutely agree.
So then
that's what Kapil Sibal said in court.
So it's very, very straight then. It's very straight. You cannot claim today a higher moral ground just on the basis of a supposition.
Morality in politics.
How do you know?
Morality in politics is dead. Politics has hardcore. But let me add one more line. The Congress should have.
So are you saying the Supreme Court is actually underwriting an immorality here?
The Supreme Court had no choice. The Supreme Court had no choice but to continue to this government. Just 10 seconds. Had no choice but to allow this government to continue only because Uddhav Thackeray ran away. But allow me one more point. Allow me one more point. Take one counter. Take one counter.
Just take one counter. Take one counter. No, it's enough of your turn. Take one counter. If he's saying that the Supreme Court had no option but to do this as a fait accompli, who has the disqualification proceedings been given to? The Speaker.
One second. Okay, allow me to rebut.
The very fact that the Speaker, which he says has been colored with illegality, has been given the onerous task to now decide upon this forthcoming disqualifications, prove that he is not colored in illegality or unconstitutionality. One second. Secondly, neither is this underwriting any kind of immorality, because anything that is essentially legal can't be immoral.
Okay. So let's get the response.
Allow me to give you a counter.
Yes, Tehseen Poonawalla.
Whatever decision the Speaker now takes will be subject to a Supreme Court review.
It is anyway.
One second. So one second. And therefore,
please let him speak.
So in any case, Rahul Narvekar will have to look at who the original whip was. They will have to go back to the parliamentary board and elect
You see where the problem is. You see where the problem is, viewers. You see where the problem is here tonight. I am not saying that politics is the crucible of morality, but quite clearly, viewers, and I want to bring in Tushar Gupta here and Kishore Tiwari once again, Tushar Gupta, the Supreme Court goes back to the same speaker. Now tells the speaker, conduct this exercise. Judge whether these people should be disqualified. The so-called floor crossers. And now this person has to act in good faith, because if he doesn't, he's in contempt of the Supreme Court. So quite clearly, the problem begins because Uddhav Thackeray realized that he had lost his party and had no moral authority of exercising his writ over it. And today, viewers, democracy is died again, says the Congress and says the Uddhav Thackeray Sena. That's bizarre, isn't it? Tushar Gupta.
Rahul, if and buts were pots and pans, there would be no work for Uddhav Thackeray's hands, as the idiom goes. The morality question, you know what is happening today? The opposition is tying itself up in knots, citing the observations of the Supreme Court. And I agree with Shehzad that anything that is legal cannot be immoral. You want to fight the elections on morality? May as well. But at the end of the day, the numbers matter. Now, if Uddhav Thackeray believed he had the numbers, he should not have resigned. Tehseen is citing a lot of hypotheticals and he's right. He's not wrong. But then did Uddhav Thackeray consult with his alliance partners, the Congress and the NCP? Did he get any legal advice before committing to a resignation? But what did Uddhav Thackeray say back then? I do not want to give rebels the privilege of questioning me. This is where you lose the party. Forget losing the government. Uddhav Thackeray couldn't keep his MLAs together. And that is where the problem began. If you're not willing to go for a floor test, if you do not have the confidence in your own MLAs, this was not about the Congress or the NCP, withdrawing the support from the Shiv Sena. It was the MLAs of the Shiv Sena. Uddhav Thackeray never went for a floor test. Now let's come to the morality question, because everyone is jumping the gun on morality. Who had the mandate in 2019 to govern Maharashtra? It was the BJP. And the majority of the seats Shiv Sena got was because Devendra Fadnavis was the chief ministerial face. Who cheated the people of Maharashtra? It was Shiv Sena. Who did betray the ideology of Bala Saheb Thackeray ji? It was the Shiv Sena under Uddhav Thackeray. Now if you're going to ally in post-poll with the NCP and the Congress, you have all the right. It's legal. It's okay. Whatever you want to call it. True. But then be ready to face the consequences. Uddhav Thackeray lost not because he betrayed the people of Maharashtra alone. Rahul, he also lost because he betrayed the ideology of Bala Saheb Thackeray ji.
Mr. Tiwari,
that's what's happening in front of us.
Two attacks, two moral improprieties. One on the original vision of the Sena as defined by Mr. Bal Thackeray, and secondly, undermining the mandate. And you're talking about morality? Is the opposition today really trying to, have its cake and bake it too? That's rather rich.
No, Rahul, this discussion that we there was a UT election, BJP Shiv Sena contested the election, and after the election, we had a Maha Vikas Aghadi tie up with the Congress and NCP. This is the history. Now, BJP broke on our party. The Operation Lotus was there, and BJP used office of governor and office of the speaker for toppling my government.
Sir, that's not fair, because you walked out. No, that's not fair. You resigned. You didn't face the floor test. Now that should have been. No, hang on. I go along with the fact that that the governor overstepped his brief. The Supreme Court has made that very clear. But in hindsight, the governor turned out to be right, because the party left. And Mr. Uddhav Thackeray wasn't ready to take the test. He lost the courage of conviction. He should not have. Mr. Sharad, tell me, is Mr. Sharad Pawar wrong?
Let me speak.
Mr. Tiwari, is Sharad Pawar wrong when he said this?
Rahul, let me speak first. Shekhar, Tushar, should I speak first?
Yeah, okay. Yes.
Because you are...
Yes, Mr. Tiwari, make your point.
Yeah, I am making my point that asking for a floor test, the Supreme Court, CJI has termed it, 5 judges unanimously termed it inter-party or intra-party activities of the
You're not
governor.
answering the question,
One
sir.
thing, governor acted illegal, that promoted, asked for a floor test, that prompted Uddhav Thackeray to resign. So
Why didn't he resign on the floor, sir? Why did he resign before the floor test? There was none after that. That's the problem.
Now,
The problem is,
now
viewers, when you play the politics of convenience.
On that.
No, 1 second. When you play,
we are going to the people who have decided. The Shahzad has raised a lot of questions that we align with them. And then
okay, I need to move on.
All issues
I need to move on. Viewers, when you play the politics of convenience, politics without conviction, then you also lack the courage of conviction to stand up for what you believe is the compulsion or the right. And that's the problem here. And today, when the Supreme Court argues against your point, you still cry murder of democracy. Viewers, that really is the ultimate irony of this entire story. Uddhav Thackeray knew that he had played fast and loose with the mandate. And he quit. He quit before the floor test. Had he not, perhaps today, he would have been back in the saddle. I leave it at this, viewers. Democracy has not been murdered in India. In fact, it has been upheld.